So the argument from Hiddenness against the existence of God is probably a little less known than the argument from evil, but it's pretty simple. So the idea is that if God exists, then God wants all humans to believe in God's existence. Since God is omniscient, omnipotent, and omnipresent, God could cause all humans to believe in God's existence. This seems obvious. But not all humans believe that God exists, therefore God does not exist. There are a lot of different options here, and you might even be able to anticipate some of them. One is to assert the fact that, in fact, God has provided us with signs of God's existence. And a lot of theists want to make this argument and say, well, look, whether we choose to accept those signs for what they are remains our choice. Maybe people just choose not to accept the signs that God has actually given us that maybe are clearer than we think. The free will defense comes in as well here. This is, again, a fairly easy out that says, look, okay, well, God wants us to have free will, so God is not going to force us to believe in God. And if God sort of forced us to believe in God by presenting us with signs that we can't ignore, I don't know if that's a violation of free will, but in any case, there have to be people who don't believe in God, perhaps, for there to be free will. And, if you think about people's beliefs that seem to go against the evidence pretty strongly in a lot of cases, this is not so crazy. We can have pretty clear signs of things and still people doubt them. For example, a philosophy example is the philosophers who doubt the existence of the world outside of our minds. It would seem obvious to most people that the world exists, right? But there are idealists who think that the world does not exist outside our own minds. So, this evidence can be pretty strong for something and people can still not believe it. So atheists like Bertrand Russell have argued back that if God has given us evidence of God's existence, it's not conclusive evidence. Russell wants to say that it's not as good evidence as we have for stuff in the world. So it's really not, God hasn't given us really, really good signs, according to Russell. Peter Ingwagen argues that, well, okay, maybe God wants humans to believe in God's existence, but it's not that big of a deal to God. Like, God is more concerned with our loving him and following the teachings of God, perhaps, than whether we believe in God's existence. And Ingwagen compares it to his desire for his wife to believe in his existence. Well, yeah, he wants his wife to believe that he exists, but he's really more concerned with whether she loves him, perhaps, or things like that. But this seems kind of a bad analogy, at least to me, because look, if Ingwagen's existence isn't really in question, because most people who know him would say that he exists. It's not really like anybody's doubting his existence, particularly in the same way that people are doubting the existence of God, or that they might have reason to. If he were a pixie or an elf or some kind of strange creature that lots of people don't believe in, then his wife's belief in him maybe would be more important to him, if lots of people were doubting his existence, and they're not. So it's not really a good analogy. William James wants to say that loving God is a good for humans, and believing in God is necessary for loving God. So for William James, God should want humans to believe. I don't know that James says this, but God should want humans to believe in God's existence if, in fact, believing in God's existence is necessary for loving God, which is a good for humans. So, and here the theist could, and if God wants humans to believe in God's existence, then we would think that God would offer more conclusive proof. But the theist could again appeal to the argument that God has a plan, something like the instrumental versus intrinsic evil argument that we saw against the argument from evil, that we as humans can't understand. So there might be reasons why we would not believe in God that could be part of God's plan. But this seems a little ad hoc, so it seems like we're just kind of inventing this in order to get out of this argument, which is what philosophers call an ad hoc argument. And then there's this idea that, well, okay, it's not really believing in God, or loving God is not really the same as believing in cats or something like that. It's a matter of faith. And Pope John Paul suggested that really our works are more important than our beliefs anyway. And that, even though the Dalai Lama doesn't believe in God in the same sense as the Catholics do, Dalai Lama can still be faithful to God. So maybe, it doesn't matter that much, and that our belief is not as important as our good works and thoughts. So perhaps for some people, this whole argument doesn't really matter that much, and maybe the hiddenness of God is not super important, because again, maybe it's not even important to God, because maybe God is more concerned with how we act and not what we actually believe. That's something that people argue about a lot.